everyone! Pineaaronapple here with our next entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, Iron Man 2, directed by Jon Favreau and written by Justin Theroux. After the hit that was Iron Man, and the surprisingly decent experience in The Incredible Hulk, we have the follow-up of the former, Iron Man 2, a movie with many ideas desperately trying to get the MCU into full steam, and a movie I remember being my favourite of the three Iron Man films. But does that mean it was the best of the three? Well, let's figure that out today. Although, the answer is probably that the Iron Man films reduce in quality with each installation. But hey, we haven't seen Iron Man 3 here yet, so who knows? Without further ado, let's start with the characters. In this movie, Robert Downey Jr. reappears as Tony Stark, and has a good character arc, just like the last movie. On paper. Faced with a seemingly inevitable death, he starts fucking around, disregarding consequence and partying unhealthily, eventually learning his lesson when he finds the cure, so that whole acceptance final point in that character arc is never reached. But I will admit, that stuff, and his relationship with his father were pretty compelling and interesting while they were used. Robert Downey Jr. is as good as ever as the character, really doing well with the script and adding his unique charm he brings to the role. So even when Tony is being a massive asshole, you can still like and understand the character. Pepper, still played by the straight-up con artist Gwyneth Paltrow, certainly existed. She wasn't bad, but was lacking in character for a large amount of the film. She gets some great scenes with Tony, some well-written banter, and some nice bits near the end, but for the rest of the film I just kind of felt like she was there and nothing more. She didn't get the agency she had in parts of the first film. No real taking charge moment, more just along for the ride. Rhodey, now played by Don Cheadle after the last guy didn't get enough money to come back, I liked far better than in the first film. Honestly, I've mostly blocked the character of Rhodey from the last film out of my mind. But here, he was pretty good. Even if a little annoying sometimes, his scenes with Tony where they disagree are well done. And the scenes where they are together otherwise are great, with good chemistry between the two, in both the writing and their performances. Our first of the villains is Whiplash, aka Ivan Vanko, played by Mickey Rourke. And this isn't a character that intrigued me a lot, either in the comics or Iron Man Armored Adventures, but for some reason I always liked him here. And I can't make sense of that, honestly. His connection to Tony was good, and general style and viciousness, although underused, was just as good. But I feel like the jokes with Hammer, like the whole bird thing, were a little strange and excessive. And although his second suit is a little pathetically generic, I loved the first design of his suit that was used in the race fight. And then there was the way that he was defeated, that was kind of pathetic, even if he did get a few good hits against Tony beforehand. Our other villain is Justin Hammer, played by Sam Rockwell, who, while not bad, acts like if Owen Wilson was both excited and a little drowsy. His place in the story is pretty well defined, and Sam Rockwell does his best with the material, getting some funny scenes like the armory scene, but it's clear from his first appearance, he isn't the immediate threat. Plus, much like Whiplash, the end for his character in this movie is quite underwhelming. So, once again, a part I enjoyed, but certainly not the best. Making her first appearance in the MCU is Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff, or Black Widow. Using her feminine wiles, she infiltrates Tony's company on behalf of Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., and is not really useful until the third act, where she is honestly badass. But before then, she's basically just used as eye candy, both from a story perspective and a marketing decision, which is kind of disappointing considering how well her character fits into the later films. But I do understand why they did it, and I'm sure you do as well. Samuel L. Jackson returns as Nick Fury, and although, like Coulson, who returned for a bit, wasn't here for long, he did leave an impact. He is mostly here to set Tony straight and assist him while building up the Avengers movie. Although that fact is plain to see, it doesn't really detract or distract from the main plot. It feels more natural than some other or more recent desperate attempts to reference or set up other parts of the MCU have been. Lastly is the director, Jon Favreau, playing Happy, who may even have a smaller role than in the last movie. I'm not sure, but he does get some great moments in this film that we will see later. So now, let's get into the plot of the film. We start back where we left off in the last film. No, not at the bar in The Incredible Hulk, but as Tony reveals he is Iron Man. Watching this broadcast in Moscow as Ivan Vanko and his father, who says that Ivan should have been the one in Tony's place, and his father seemingly dies in his arms. Probably the most emotional we see this character, even if his yells aren't that convincing. We also see that his father had a hand in making the arc reactor, and the credits take us through his building montage and Stalker Wall. 6 months later, Tony has a pretty good, if not overindulgent, entrance into the new Stark Expo. A year of some of the world's greatest minds coming together in the name of science. Something his father pioneered. We also see that Tony's blood is starting to become toxic, as we will see through the film, being a side effect of his arc reactor. We also see a clip of Howard Stark introducing us to the Stark Expo in a nice bit of history for the characters. We then follow first person as Tony leaves the expo with Happy, and one low-effort Stanley cameo later, we are interrupted by a random Kate Mara cameo, who serves Tony to appear before the Senate. The same Senate he is taken to via Star Wars screen wipe, who he humiliates in the same breath as Justin Hammer, who comes in to have Tony's suits taken away from him for the Senate. Rhodey makes his grand entrance as well, which is a decent way of showing us the actor change, making a grand named entrance instead of just having him appear and expecting the audience to figure out his identity. I always loved seeing the clip of Hammer crippling a man, and the main senator telling Tony Stark to fuck off, as Tony gloats and is applauded out of there, while Ivan broods and adds his finishing touches to his weaponry. I love seeing him build these things because it gives us a nice duality between him and Tony, much like their fathers had. Back at home and playing some of The Clash, Tony is taking countermeasures to the negative effects of the arc reactor and showing us what he's been up to these months with a few new suits. Jarvis tells Tony he is basically dying, and Pepper comes in to argue with Tony about, well, nothing important, but this scene is fun, and those two work off each other quite well, ending with the dying Tony giving Pepper the CEO position of Stark Industries. Well, that explains how she found the money for her company Goop. Back in Russia, Ivan gets a fake identity, and as Tony boxes with Happy, he finds his Scarlett Johansson with this tasteful underwear shot. And it gets quite humorous as she slaps Happy onto the mat. Another scene change takes us to Monaco, where Tony is sponsoring a vehicle in a race. After a strange cameo from this questionably human business owner, Hammer makes an appearance where they mug off each other to a reporter. It's quite fun, Hammer wanting to show something off at the expo. We'll get back to that later. Tony's blood now over half toxic. His impulsivity takes over, and he jumps into the race himself, overshadowing Hammer. And this race is shot fairly well, I thought, keeping the viewer intrigued as we see the race and cut to Ivan skulking around. And his entrance is no sloucher as he walks onto the racetrack and starts to fuck shit up as his shirt literally burns off of him. It's pretty badass. He chops cars in half and eventually makes his way to Tony, while Pepper and Happy drive into the race to get him his Iron Man suit. The battle is both pretty cool and fun, although some of the camera movements can be a little jarring every now and then. By the end, Tony takes Ivan's reactor and Ivan is hauled away by the cops, while Hammer gets an idea. Tony goes to interrogate Ivan, but doesn't get much out of him, only learning about the connection between the two of them. The senator uses the appearance of Whiplash to push his agenda, and Tony tries to spend some time with Pepper. Meanwhile, we get a pretty good scene of Ivan getting help to escape prison, although it does feel kind of anticlimactic as he is taken by the end, not actually fighting his way out of the prison, ending up with Justin Hammer in a pretty good scene. The way these two in no way work off each other somehow makes them more entertaining while together, becoming the movie's villain team-up. Tony does some research on Anton and his father, only for Rhodey to come by and try to help Tony as the government wants to take his suits. And we get a nice scene between the two as Rhodey helps Tony with the reactor, and starting his downward spiral. We get another scene with the bad guys as Vanko starts to meddle with the suits, and Black Widow does some obnoxious flirting with Tony, and their conversation leads to him being a massive drunk douchebag. And I want to leave this part of the movie as fast as possible, because even though the fight with Rhodey, who leaves with the silver suit, is well done, it annoys me in its overindulgence. Of course, it's meant to be this way, but everyone starts to annoy me here, even if it's understandable due to Tony's situation. But there is some nice foreshadowing I noticed. When the fight gets near Black Widow, she falls out of her cover and adopts a combat-ready position. Now enjoying some hangover donuts, Tony is met by Fury, who reintroduces him to Black Widow, who comes to give Tony a temporary cure to the blood poison, introduced with a camera shot 1/6 her arse. It's nice to see Fury again, as it is Coulson later, but they don't get much to do in this film, so it is a little jarring when you think about exactly how much of the movie they are actually in on rewatch, as I could have sworn Fury had a bigger role here, while completely forgetting Coulson's appearance. Back with Hammer, the two villains are both still strange, and it seems Ivan has started to replace Hammer's suits with drones, leading Hammer to become quite irate.
Jack, could you put your head in there? No. Try to put your head in there. No, go ahead. Try to put your head in there. See, Ivan, he can't put his head in there.
Back with the army, they commend Rhodey for taking the suit, and these three extras stand around very strangely. Fury gives Tony his father's research from S.H.I.E.L.D. and some information about how Vanko helped Tony's father make the reactor, leaving Coulson to be funny while Tony tries to wrap his head around the new information. Back with the army, Hammer appears to faff around, and we get an admittedly humorous weapon montage to see what they want to mount to the suit. Because why have lasers when you can have guns? Tony and his father get some great character work as he broods among his father's old stuff. And Tony goes back to Pepper, whose name I did not know was Virginia and not Pepper. And she is doing CEO stuff. Tony tries to speak to her, but is about as clear and concise as Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, this scene annoys me, but Tony does get a great hint to his problem, stealing a 3D model of the Stark Expo. It's turning out to be the key he needs to find the new element needed for the not-so-poisonous upgrade to his arc reactor that he creates in a tense but pretty gratifying scene. Meanwhile, Ivan is also working on his suit, only for Hammer to have a small freakout and take all his stuff, leaving him to be guarded by two guards, who are quickly shown to be brutally killed, as Ivan calls Tony to thank him for the tips on how to make a better suit, and to exposit his plan and hatred for Stark. Tony's arc reactor seems to be quite good, and we arrive at Hammer's stage show at the expo, as he shows off his drones after a little dance sequence. These drones are also joined by Rhodey in the War Machine suit, which looks pretty badass, not gonna lie, as does Tony's new suit, as he lands on the stage soon after. This culminates in Ivan taking remote control of the suits, and sending them to attack Tony, who lures them away while Hammer freaks out. Natasha smacks Hammer around as Pepper takes charge, Tony continuing to fly around with the suits, eventually landing in this Asian-inspired garden area, and I think they did the whole aerial battle great. There are even one or two funny moments in there, but I think it just genuinely looks great overall. Meanwhile, Natasha requisitions Happy's car, and he drives her towards Ivan. She proceeds to change in the backseat of the car, and it seems Happy is quite the relatable character. Jokes aside, this movie's tone is all over the place. Natasha and Happy have a great fight scene here as well. Natasha going badass, and although not stopping many bad guys, Happy does well too. Ivan fled, still leaving those bodies tied to the ceiling, and Natasha works to stop Rhodey's suit before he kills Tony. Rhodey is freed, and Tony has an impromptu talk about his sickness with Pepper. Rhodey gets back up and together with Tony fights the hammer droids in a pretty cool scene, their chemistry working well along with the action. Hammer is arrested after some yapping, and Whiplash lands on the scene in his underwhelming suit. I suppose removed from the character, the suit does look good, but the CGI to put his head in it looks like garbage. The fight is pretty cool, but is over fairly quickly and unceremoniously, although the callback is a nice Chekhov's gun. All of the Hammerbots self-destruct, our heroes escaping, but not before Tony manages to save Pepper from one she just decided to stare at. I don't know about you, but I always avoid things that have those obvious beeping noises, because it's almost always a bomb, or your car telling you the door's slightly ajar, or you don't have your seatbelt on. Tony lands on a roof with Pepper, where they argue and make up in a decent scene. A little rambling, but Rhodey's appearance was quite funny. We get another scene with Fury and Tony setting up the Avengers, and the film ends with the senator from before giving medals to our heroes. Of course, since this is Marvel, we get an after-credits scene with Coulson discovering Mjolnir to lead us into Thor, and it's pretty cool, even if the thunder sounds at the end were a bit much. Like usual, there aren't many standouts made for the movie on the OST. Maybe one or two tracks were a little too loud in the sound mix, but what did stand out to me is it really felt like there were a fair few more licensed songs put in here compared to the last time. Just hopping through the movie, I can find that there was Shoot to Thrill at the start of the film, Should I Stay or Should I Go not being the only Clash song here, some Queen leading into Daft Punk, and more AC/DC at the end. These songs appearing didn't really detract from the film, and bands like AC/DC are probably what come to mind when you think of music relating to Iron Man now, but in retrospect, I feel it could probably be called overindulgent. Now, as for the cinematography, there weren't any shots I specifically remember, but I do recall the film being visually pleasant. Most of the CGI was well done and has aged pretty well, and competently placed in scenes. And shot composition and cutting never felt overzealous or sickening like some action movies can do. And with how the Iron Man suit works, I think that it's a testament to the movie maker's effort that when flying through the air at high speeds and even in battle and the like, the visuals don't get disorientating in any way. So, Iron Man 2 was a decent sequel to the first movie. Not only doing well to continue with these characters, even if one looks completely different, and to continue the universe as a whole. While probably not as good as the first film critically, I certainly enjoyed it enough to warrant a close score to the last film. So I'll give Iron Man 2, written by Justin Theroux and directed by Jon Favreau, a 7 out of 10. And on the rewatchability scale, I'll give it a smooth ride, a completely middle-of-the-road rating. Thank you everybody so much for watching my review of Iron Man 2, even if I was hungover both when finishing writing this and while recording the audio. Please like the video if you liked it, comment down below if there's any reviews you want me to do in the near future, subscribe, and if you do, ring the notification bell so you're told every single time I make an upload, and if you can spare a little bit of cash, I would be so glad if you went over to my Ko-fi you can find probably in the description of any video or on my channel page. Once again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!
a little piece of toast. Because there's so much to choose from. There's brown bread, white bread, all sorts of wholemeal bread. It comes in funny packages with writing on the side.